Hello and welcome back to another video I'm really excited to talk to you about, and it's PS3 emulation. Now, if you were like me back in the day, you probably had an Xbox 360, as most people did, at least for that initial stage from the mid 2000s through to probably about 2010-11. That's when the PS3 really started to bang out some really good games. By then it was a bit too late and I missed that initial wave. But what I've done in recent years is I've picked up an old PS3 and I've soft modded it. So this is my collection that I run on an external hard drive on the PS3. All these games obviously run as stock and perfectly well, although some of them are a bit sluggish, a bit chuggy, and the resolution is obviously quite low, as the PS3 originally outputted at 720p. But that's not what I'm here to talk to you about. What I want to talk to you about, obviously, is the emulation. Here we can see I've transported some of those games over to the emulator, the RPCS3, and it's absolutely amazing. We're to the back end of 2021 now, and emulation has really come a long way for the PS3. If you can see there's a little hash mark against some of the names. Those games have got custom settings, and here you can see you can set them up. Specifically the GPU tab, which is what I want to show you here. Keep the games in that standard 720p mode, but you can bump up this resolution slider right up to 4K. And all these games I've tested, well, most of these games that I've tested run absolutely amazingly at 4K. So I wanted to jump through a few of them here and show you what I'm talking about. There's also this new upscaling. This has just come in recently, where you can take the games at the 720p, bump up the resolution with this AMD new software that they're promoting and using, that has been implemented into the simulator. I've not actually had a chance to test it out yet, so that's maybe something that I'll do in the future. But here I also just wanted to show you, I hate the way that emulator looks, and I've made my own kind of custom front end for the emulator using EmulationStaion, so it just looks a bit nicer when I'm picking games. Some of these tabs have got videos, others are just pictures, and it's kind of thrown together, cobbled together really. It can look a lot nicer than what I've done, and I'm sure over the next few months I'll probably tidy it up and add a few more videos. But without further ado, I know it's a little bit of a ramble there. I just wanted to get through the introduction of what I want to show you. And now we're going to jump into some contrasting gameplay. Some at the stock 720p, and then what it looks like bumped up to 4K. Let's get into it. So the first game we're going to look at here, Prince of Persia, Forgotten Sands. Never been a huge fan of the rebooted Prince of Persia. But this is probably the game that I found the most staggering in terms of the upscaling and how impressive it looked. So we're going to jump between 720p and then obviously 4K. Now it's worth noting, it depends what you're watching this on. Obviously YouTube compress when the video is uploaded, so it's not going to look as good as it does natively. Here we go. Oh, look at that. I mean, even the lighting is completely impressive, as well as all the actual visuals. The definition that you now find just makes this look like a modern title, even though this came out, I don't even know when this came out, over a decade ago. Really impressive. But yeah, I got kind of pulled away there. We're going to jump back and forth, and there's a bunch of games I want to show you. So just make sure you go into your settings if you're watching this on YouTube, and just make sure you're at the highest resolution possible, because that will make a difference. And then of course it depends what you're watching this on. If you're watching it on a smushed up phone, you might not see the full benefit of what I'm trying to show you here. Likewise, if you're only watching this on a 1080p monitor, you still see the improvement, but it won't be as staggering as if you're on a 4K screen or a 1440p screen or whatever. And of course it depends if it's OLED, IPS. All those different things will mean that this does look slightly different than how I'm seeing it and how it displays to you. But it's still going to be very prevalent to see that just the native resolution. And I think that this 720p mode in the emulator is actually still much better than what you find on a native PS3 for the majority of games. I haven't played this one on my PS3, but I'm pretty sure it won't look this good, and it probably doesn't run this smoothly. Certainly in other games, as we'll get to, you can definitely feel that the emulator runs the game a lot smoother. Primarily, it will run games in 60 frames per second. Some are stripped back to the 30 just because of how they're engineered, and custom animations and things are all set around that 30, so you can't go past that. Otherwise, the game just goes really fast, and it kind of runs in 200 speed, 200% speed rather than the default standard 100% speed, because you've doubled the frame rate. So we're going to jump into the next game here, a game I'm not that fond of actually. What I was going to say on the Prince of Persia game, although I didn't ever get into that bump in resolution and the smoothness of that game, I could seriously play that on the emulator in 4K and get really drawn into it. It was very atmospheric and very engrossing and engaging to play with the bumped up resolution and the smoothness. However, Driver San Francisco, rather, I've heard this is a really good game, and we're going to see some footage there of 720p, and you can see it's notably better in 4K. It's not as staggering as the previous game was, but it's still a lot crisper, sharper. You can see the draw distance is improved, not specifically the draw distance, but because the visuals are sharper in the background, it looks like the draw distance is improving. Everything is crisp and smooth as it should be, and it's just a really staggering thing to see. Again, we're running here, I think this game runs at 60 frames per second. I should have probably put on an overlay, but I didn't want it to be too intrusive. I've got the little sign there in the bottom left just so I can see, but a really awesome game. Now, Stranglehold, John Woo presents Stranglehold. This game is absolutely a ton of fun to play. Here we're just running it in 720p, and this is where we have a bit of an issue, because not all games will upscale. Majority of them will. As you'll see here, we run into some issues. This is a bit like an arcadey Max Payne. You got the bullet time slowdown effect. If you haven't played this game, it's worth just getting the emulator just to have a blast through this. And again, I played this on the PS3. It does not look this smooth, and it does not look this crisp in the native resolution as we're seeing here. Even this 720p mode on the emulator just looks a lot clearer. I don't know if it's more defined, but it's certainly less blurry, which is obviously a massive benefit. Because here it comes in 4K, and you can see already at the title screen, we're just not going to stay on this for very long because it just has this green overlay. And I've googled it, I've looked into it. Unfortunately, this is something that they need to try and figure out with future updates, but it's quite impressive. A few years ago, this game wouldn't have even ran in 720p smoothly, so it's really staggering to see that 720p mode looks as good as it does. Unfortunately, you can't upscale this game. It gives this horrible green overlay. So we're going to move on to our next game, and again, quite an impressive game that we're coming up to see emulated so well. And that's Skate 3, a classic. Here it is, just in the 720p, and again, I'll say we're going to jump back and forth here on this one. I will say that this game ran awfully on the PS3. I tried to play it about a year ago when I got my PS3, and it just chugs along at about 15 to 25 frames a second, rarely hitting 30 frames a second. Here, on the emulator, running at the native 720p, it hits 120 frames per second, so it's just ultra smooth, as smooth as it could possibly be. And here you can see on 4K, it just looks really impressive. It's not as super shining as I think Prince of Persia was. However, it's definitely something you could really get drawn into and just have a ton of fun playing this game. I'm not that familiar with it, and it's been a long time since I played the originals, so I was a bit rusty here, but 720p, trying to show you some highlights. This mode, particularly if you look into the background there over on the right, just at 720p, still looks pretty decent actually through this emulator, and obviously running very smooth on this very fast course. But if you now look at it in 4K, it's just ultra crisp, ultra smooth, ultra defined, and just a joy to play in 2021. They certainly need to bring this game back with Escape 4 or some kind of reboot, because it's pretty awesome once you get into it. And I've only played this for a couple of hours, but I'm going to spend a lot more time with this on the emulator because it just runs fantastic. So another game, one of my favourites back, I actually played this to 100% completion on the Xbox 360, here on the PS3, and again, it looks pretty cool in 720p mode, and it runs better here in the emulator than it did in real life on a PlayStation 3. However, as we all see here, as we switch over to the same sort of area in 4K mode, doesn't look a huge amount improved. It is improved, and it's certainly more defined, but you're running one of these sort of animated, cel-shady type games, you're not quite going to see the improvements that you do on the well-detailed 3D games, and that is that's just the way that these games were made. It's obviously very saturated and blocky and bright and vivid colours, but it doesn't have all the detail that really benefits from the upscaling. However, having said that, it certainly still does look better in 4K. It is less blurry, and the outlines in particular on the characters do look a lot better in the 4K mode, as you can hopefully see here. I'm not sure, this is one of the games where it doesn't make so much difference that I don't know how well it comes across on YouTube after the compression. But it's certainly worth playing through, and it's just a brilliant game anyway. Even though people like it, I think that's underrated there. It's The Simpsons. Here we go, we're just going to flash through a sports game. I wanted to show a sports game because I play a lot of American football games, and they're pretty awful of recent years. This is probably the best football game you can buy for pure realism, I guess, or simulation. Obviously you don't have the NFL license, this is all pro football. I'm just going to show the kickoffs here. Probably not the best place to show, but certainly if you look at the grass, if you look at the character models, and the backgrounds, the crowds, the sidelines, is a huge improvement at 4K there, and I'll be spending a lot of time playing all pro football. Here we go, here's a game that doesn't really benefit from the 4K mode, so we're going to fly through this. Rayman's Legends is pretty awesome. It's running at 60 frames per second. This is at 720p, and now at 4K. You can see it's basically identical. You can tell it maybe slightly, some of the lines are a bit more detailed, but it's pretty much the exact same, and certainly on YouTube you're going to see that this looks the same. So we're going to fly through that one. Obviously it's animated and it's 2D, so you're not going to see true benefit. Here's a strange game, Haze. This was sort of signposted as the Halo killer, if you remember, for the PS3, and it basically was a dud. Rather dull gameplay. However, if you upscale this to 4K and play through the emulator, because it's a lot smoother running at 60 frames per second, it's actually not that bad. I've only played this first introduction bit. Here you can see in 720p it's still a bit muggy and a bit blurry, although running better than it did on the original hardware. I'll just reiterate that again. If you look at it now in 4K, explosions just look better, enemies are more clear to see, you've got the grass, the trees, they all look much better, and it's a much more enjoyable experience. I never thought playing playing games, graphics really mattered, but when you upscale these old games, it's like you bring a whole new life to them. And I've never been one for graphics, but I was probably wrong. The graphics do make a difference, and if you upscale these games, you're going to have a lot more enjoyment out of them. I can guarantee that for 90% of the games. Here's a bit of a classic, an underrated game. People do love it, but not enough people mention it. No More Heroes here. 720p actually looks really good. Again, I haven't played this on the PS3, unfortunately, so I can't give you my thoughts on a comparison, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't look this good in 720p on a PS3. And when you upscale this to 4K, it's just truly remarkable how well this looks. We're just going to show a little couple of clips of the introduction here, and then a little bit of the gameplay before driving as well on that awesome motorbike. But just looks so good in 720p on the emulator, but at 4K it really does look much better. And I again don't know how well that comes across on these YouTube videos, because it looks so good in 720p. Unfortunately, this game I think is locked at 30 frames per second, just going from memory, as I recorded this a couple of days ago. So that is a bit of a shame, but it runs so smooth that you don't really notice that it's not to the modern day standard of 60 frames per second. And it's certainly, you know, with all the explosions and blood and body limbs flying around, there's just so much going on screen that you don't notice if the frame rate's not quite as smooth as some other games, because it feels absolutely responsive and just a joy to play again, especially when you upscale it here to 4K. Just really impressive how all the animations and all the things that are going on, all the blood and, you know, the lights and the shadows. In particular, the reflections just look awesome. Actually, when I did play this game, you might notice it because you might be, if you're on the phone, you've got a smaller screen, but there is a bit of a funny border that pops up on the top and the left-hand side of the screen. That pops up only when you're upscaling to 4K. And it was the game, I was so immersed in the game, it took me a long time before I even noticed that. Obviously here in 720p, you can see, this is a good sort of side-by-side, because you can see the backgrounds and the detail in the signs and things like that, if you notice that, the sky perhaps, as we're in this sort of open world area. It is a bit blurry, and it is a bit hard to make out some of the objects, and there's not real great definition there. In the smaller rooms it's less noticeable at 720p, but here, when you're trying to drive, things aren't as crisp as you'd expect from a game in 2021. But when we upscale it, as we're going to cut away to here in a second to 4K to do the side-by-side, you can see here in the same area a lot more defined. You can see what that sign's saying. You can see the background's a lot clearer, a lot crisper. Obviously the character looks crisper and more defined. But you can see what I mean about the border on the left-hand side on the top of the screen there. Again, I'm using a very good monitor. It's only 27 inches, but it's 1440p, and it's pretty expensive. So I didn't even notice that, because typically you're not looking right at the top of the screen. But it's something to bear in mind that some games do run into some graphical side effects, I guess, as you upscale them, but the majority of the ones, there's a compatibility list. It's probably worth noting as we're at the end of the video. There is a compatibility list. It's not super defined, but it will tell you whether the games run well enough, or whether there's issues, or whether they don't boot. Majority of games will at least boot and get you to a menu. Some games don't run well in terms of the actual emulation, and they stutter. But you'll find that all out on their website. It's quite easy to find. I'll try and leave a link in the description if you want to check out this emulator. And that's kind of where we end it. We're going to end it with Katamari here. Again, another classic game. And this, I haven't done a 720p side by side for this game. This is just a bit of backfeed filler roll. But this game just looks so awesome. I wanted to show it off just because the other animated cartoony games like Simpsons and Rayman didn't really show off much improvement from playing in 4K, but you can see how clear and crisp this more animated game looks, because it is a 3D world. It's even though it's not super defined, you get less fog, or there's no fog on this now in 4K. You can see everything super clear, and the frame rate again is perfect. So worth having a look into this if you're a fan of PS3. It's a bit harder to emulate Xbox 360, so you know, those cross-gen titles you'll want to play on this emulator. Unfortunately, as I said, you can't play some of the bigger titles like The Last of Us. It does get into game, but it runs at about 10-15 frames per second. Same with Uncharted, it's not as smooth. You can get anywhere from 60 down to about 20 frames per second there. And obviously, I'm running this on good hardware. I've got a 3070 GPU and a i9 10850K CPU. So, you know, if I can't run the games, unless you've got something better than that, is not a huge amount of point trying, to be honest with you. But the emulator and the development team keep making benefits and keep getting better and keep producing more staggering results. So who knows, in a couple of months, 6 months, a year, you may well see that some of those bigger titles, the blockbuster titles, do run well enough to play through this emulator. And I'm also going to check out that FSR AMD's upscaling and see if I get any benefit out of using that on those games. If I do, I'll make another video. Otherwise, stay tuned, subscribe, and there will be more videos like this on other consoles, because I'm getting into my emulation now. I can see how far ahead it is in 2021. Hopefully, speak to you soon.